Hey guys, this is Tolly and welcome to Let's Build a JRPG, part 3 I guess technically now. Let's jump into it. So there's been a couple things I've done since the last stream off camera. Primarily some folder sorting, just getting everything kind of set into different spots. I also, as per Rob's suggestion, set up a GitHub that is not public at this point. Actually I set up 2 GitHubs, because the other thing I did, was I basically went through and downloaded a large amount of assets that I have purchased over the years. I've bought a bunch of things off of the asset store, and I have grabbed some of those very useful, basically models and art packs, as well as some other things like an inventory engine and a few other pieces that I have at my disposal, and I've added them to the project. But because of that, I've had to set up 2 GitHub accounts. I've set up one which is all the stuff that store assets, which I wouldn't want to redistribute, and then I've also set up a GitHub which is primarily just this folder, which is all the stuff that we've created ourselves. So I may make this one public at some later point. I haven't done it at this point, but the GitHubs are set up, so in the future, if I ever do toggle them public, all of the commits from each stream will be there. That's a weird update. May not even make sense to some people, but that's one thing we've done. And then the other really quick thing I did off camera was I modified one of our scripts, specifically the character parser, so that it has this extra line here, which imports asset. We were running into a problem last stream where when we would do our tools character parser that we had to right click and re-import, and I had said that's something that I've noticed for a while now. I realized there had to be a fix, so basically after we write this file out, we just tell Unity to import that asset, and so now we don't have to worry about re-importing assets after we parse them out into these JSON formats. So that's another quick thing we did. And finally, actually, there's one last thing, which is I got the debugger up and running, which took a bit of work, but primarily was I spent half an hour in the last stream, which I cut out of the last video, trying to get the debugger to work, and I said I would try and fix it off camera. What it ended up being was inside of Visual Studio. I went back to 2017 because it just seemed easier as I uninstalled and reinstalled Unity and Visual Studio multiple times. But no matter what I did, didn't seem to matter until eventually I got my Google Foo proper, and I was able to find a mention that inside of Visual Studio, if you go into Modify, there are, if it gets there, some individual components that you can tick on, and under individual components down here, there is Visual Studio Tools for Unity and Unity 2018 or whatnot. So ticking those 2 on, I'm not sure which one it was, but ticking those 2 on enabled the attached to Unity. So that was that problem. I think that primarily had to do with the fact that we had multiple versions of Visual Studio installed. A fresh user installing Unity for the first time shouldn't run into something like that, but that's what my problem was. Okay. Updates out of the way. Let's jump into what we're doing today. So I don't have a ton of time, so I don't want to jump into like attack abilities or stats or anything more complicated, but seeing as I did download a bunch of these art assets that I've purchased over the years, I thought we could start at least laying out the scene, maybe not setting it up so the models are being dynamically loaded, but at least start trying to figure out what is our scene going to look like. And honestly, I don't have a lot of 2D art. In general, this type of art is kind of hard to even just purchase, even for off of the asset store. There's just not a lot of art out there. Can I get you to show me the asset store? I can, sweet. Like, so if I go into 2D art and I go characters, like there is pixel art, but it's like, I don't know, it varies in quality, and generally pixel art tends to stand out if it looks different. I mean, none of this would be shippable, but I'd like to have something that looks at least somewhat consistent as I kind of build. So like some of this is kind of neat, but like this is for a 2D platformer. That's not really the right angle. Like I often find that the angle is the problem. It's hard to find enough art of specific angles to make some of this stuff work. And then character animations are also quite a bit harder in 2D as well. Thanks for dropping by, Morphus. Even if it is just to say goodnight. So we got, yeah, so it's hard to get character animation stuff working. If we change this to like 96, we can get a better idea, but it's just, you can find sprites, but it's just, to get the quality that I'm looking for, it's just a little bit harder. So we're going to go with the easy route, which is 3D, which there's a lot more 3D assets available, and you can kind of make 3D look somewhat similar, especially if you get into shaders, which not right now, but like these guys look neat, but they're like very different from a lot of the other art side. Anyways, so we're going 3D. That's the long and winded explanation for that. So, and also I have this set that I really like. So this set here, which we'll find in the asset store first because it does a better job of showing it off, is the Little Heroes. I bought this like 2-3 years ago, and they continue to update it, which is fantastic. Did I spell it wrong? Let's just spell hero. Mega Pack? I still have 2D ticked on, don't I? Yeah, this guy. You can turn chat back on. I won't be... Oh, okay, cool. Let's see. So we've got these guys. So we've got a bunch of these 3D models. They kind of have a bit of a blocky look to them. But one of the things I really like about this pack that I kind of enjoy is that it's all customizable. It all comes as a series of different body types, and then all of those pieces can then be attached with other helms and other elements like weapons and armor. And I don't know if there's a good image of it, but like there is a series of different like weapons, and then there's a series of different looks for those weapons. So if we wanted to, we could have equipment that the character equips and then actually change the model on the character based on which weapon they have. So it's just a very versatile pack for doing that sort of thing, just having that kind of functionality visualized. So let's grab the prefabs. So you can customize, like I said, by going in and grabbing the individual base models and then attaching hair, accessories, and weapons, but we'll probably just grab a couple of these. I was looking through them earlier. I like this dude. He's pretty rad. We need to switch from 2D to 3D. Whoa. So he's a cool little mage dude. He's got a little mage wand. He shall do for the time being. I also like the Male Knight 2. He's got some cool dark armor. It's nice, almost Roman style, like red feather off the top. I'm not sure if that's Roman, but that, you know, he's neat. And then Barbarian Female. I thought this one was kind of a cool one too. Almost Mad Max style. Actually, maybe that's not what I want. What about this one? You know what? She seems cooler. Maybe it's Barbarian 1 I want. Okay. So I've picked out like 3 different characters that I want to like build this scene with. First off, the canvas was put under the main camera. It doesn't need to be there. The main camera we're going to want to play with, and if the canvas is under the main camera, we'd be manipulating the canvas, which we don't want. We have to make some calls about a couple things. So if we look in the game, well, number one, we can't see anything because this image covers it, but these guys are dark. We need to add a light first off. We'll just add a directional light. So this is going to be basically similar to the sun. We can kind of rotate it to... Actually, can I rotate it? What is the direction of this? If I rotate this, it should... No? It's been a while since I've done any lighting stuff. Apparently the directional light does not care. Light has been disabled in at least one scene view. Any changes applied to lights in the scene will not update in these views until lights have been enabled. There we go. We had a little toggle turned off. Thank you, warning tip. There we go. That's what I was expecting. So we can kind of play with this to kind of emulate. Directional lights are basically lights from infinitely far away. So it's similar to the sun in that it's a light source that's very far away that's projecting a lot of light in essentially one direction. In the same way that the sun kind of passes overhead, and as it passes overhead, kind of create shadows. So it's a light from a very far distance. So this will probably work for at least giving the character some light for the time being. So now they're not dark, but they're all facing the wrong way. So we're going to want to set these guys up. Let's start with the wizard. So we'll turn him so he's rotated. And in fact, in order to make this a little bit easier, we'll bring this down here so that we can kind of see what we're manipulating from the game view. And then let's just make it -90. Okay, so now he's facing this way. Kind of move him back to about here. If we bring up the image, that's going to cover everything. Okay, so we want to make this... Okay, so we want to add a new camera to the scene. Create camera. We want to change this camera, instead of being overlay, to be screen space camera. And then we want that camera that we just made to be the camera that we use for screen space. Just changes things slightly. And then what we can do is we can change this camera to have a depth of -1. And then we can change the main camera to have a depth of 1. And then we can change it so that it doesn't have a skybox in the background. Depth only, don't clear. Solid color. I think for the time being, for setting up this stuff via reference, I think we basically just want to set this to have depth only, so that we can kind of set these characters up in similar-ish positions. Alright. So now we have characters. Also, for the sake of just making this a little more readable, I'm just going to make a game object which will be at 0, 0, 0. Make sure to set that to the default position. And then we can rename this to main or 3D model. Main actors. Main entities. Fine. Main entities. Then we can drag all of these guys into that. And then we can close this canvas. The directional light can go in with the main canvases. We'll make another thing which will be managers. And the managers can go in here, and we can collapse that as well. This can be UI camera, and this can be the main camera, which if I want I can put it under the main entities. Might be able to put this under the canvas. Does that break anything? Does not seem to. Okay, and then now we can collapse some of this stuff, and it's a little easier to see where things go. Alright, so now we've got this wizard dude, and he's kind of in a position. Maybe we move him back a bit. So he's about the right size, which I'm not... Okay, so the real problem here is perspective. And this is... we're going to basically put these guys in a general formation. It's not going to be perfect, but we're going to rotate him by -90 so he's facing the right way. We're going to position him there. We'll take the wizard, slightly offset him like this. And then we'll take the barbarian female, also rotate into the right direction, and then place here. We're using 3 because we want a couple of these characters in order to try and get a good idea of what this looks like. So if we look at the game view looks pretty awful because they're all kind of standing, in the same plane, whereas that's not really what's emulated in the 2D version. The 2D version that we're trying to emulate is really they're all kind of offset slightly. So what we want to do is we want to grab the camera, we want to bring it up slightly, and then rotate down. And what this is going to do is give us a bit more of an offset as the camera's looking at them from above instead of perfectly from the side. And then once we're here, then we can start manipulating these characters a little bit more to be a little bit more offset. Still not exactly perfect by any means. I don't really want to move them up and down. I think the big thing here is that I don't want to move them off 0, 0. I want 0, 0 to be the floor. Sadly, their main position is actually in their head. So 0, 0... Oh no, their pivot's on the floor. Okay, sorry, I'm just manipulating. So this is toggled it so that they're from the center. We're going to move it from the center of all objects. Like, it basically takes an average of where the middle of it is. Instead, we're going to take it from the pivot, which is actually where it's... The person who created this designed it so that the pivot is on the bottom at the feet, which is what we want. So 0, 0, yes, is the floor. So now if we create another 3D object, which is a plane, and we put that plane on the floor at 0, 0. Now they're sitting on something. Oh, lol. So the reason that appears in front of the screen is because this camera that we have the canvas on is technically in the same kind of zone or screen space. So this just needs to get moved out of the way. It needs to be far away from where the main scene is. The other way we can set this up is we can make it so this camera doesn't show everything. Instead, it only shows nothing but UI, and then we can tag all this stuff so that it's UI, change all children. So now it'll only show UI. Now we can move it back here to someone in the center if we want, and it won't show up the plane, because now this camera is only going to render objects that have the tag or the layer UI on them, and only this stuff has the layer UI. Okay, I'm still going to move it off to one side because it's somewhat distracting having the giant portrait in the scene view when we're trying to modify. So it's just going to go off there. So we've got a bunch of these characters now standing on this plane, which if we were to give this like a dirt tile, it would start to look a little better. This is going to be most of the stream, is just fiddling with these guys. We probably don't want them perfectly 90. Let's try 120 so that they're like slightly facing the camera so that they're not completely side on. And then this character we want to move away a little bit like that. And then I think for the directional light, we want their faces lit a bit better. So we actually want the directional light to be coming from this direction. Okay, now if we go back to game view, how are we doing? When you get rid of the reference image, that doesn't look as bad. Interesting. It may not be able to, with 3D, perfectly reflect the exact reference image, but if we're getting close enough, it might be fine. So we might want to move, let's go back to global space. We want to just move you down a bit. What does that look like? That actually gets you a bit closer. Okay. Yeah, just moving you down a bit gets you into a closer position. The other option we have to make a decision about at some point is whether or not we want this setup to be in orthographic or perspective. So orthographic, so perspective, these guys look super weird. Okay, how do I explain? So orthographic is basically like, we assume everything is perfectly flat. So this thing is a box and it doesn't really take into account depth. It just picks a pixel and then looks directly and sees where that pixel is. But perspective is kind of shooting rays out from the center, so you end up with more of a 3D effect. So by going orthographic, we tend to make these things look more flat. You can't really have, like, I don't know how to better explain this, honestly, but it's an intuitive thing. But if we go perspective, these guys go kind of wonky, but it's because the camera now has more understanding of their three-dimensional. Change the field of view though. It makes them bigger or smaller because we have a wider field of view. Honestly, I don't mind orthographic for this style. We're basically trying to emulate a 2D look with 3D models, so orthographic is essentially going to be the best option. The other thing we can do is we can change the size of the orthographic camera. which is essentially going to make these guys bigger or smaller. If we make them smaller, we can always move them in to the camera view again, or easier to show this is just to move the camera up, or move the camera so that they are in the box again. Oh, it needs to go over to one side. So now they're huge. So we can kind of manipulate how big we want these guys to be a little bit by changing the size of the orthographic camera. So for example, if we only ever plan to have 3 characters on screen, this sizing maybe doesn't make as much sense, and we might actually want to have a much tighter look. Maybe not that tight. So that the 3 of them take up most of the space. Again, if we get rid of the reference image, this becomes a little easier to see and understand. One thing I also wouldn't mind trying is for this plane that we created, giving it some sort of texture. Okay. I don't know if we have any ground textures that we can work with. The other option is that we could put them on 2D art if we wanted to. There's no reason that we couldn't have another canvas and then have these guys floating in or floating against a 2D backdrop. Let's try a couple things. Let's go 2D environments. For the sake of simplicity, we'll go with free. Let's get the game view out of here. I think it's slowing down the store a little bit. The store just seems a little bit slower in general today. I assume it is my computer. The type of thing we're looking for is actually pretty specific in terms of environment look. Like, we're not looking for a tile set per se. We're more looking for that classic D&D, or not D&D, but Final Fantasy, like, it's an environment and it's painted very specifically at a very particular angle. Trying to find that exactly might be difficult. In some ways it could be easier to just set up a scene and level design out like environments, again, potentially in 3D to make it look a little bit better. Yeah, I'm not seeing any art of the type that I'm looking for, so let's go a different route. Let's go 3D environments. Time of day. What about time of day, Rob? I'm not sure what I mentioned. This poly desert looks like it could be kind of cool. I'm honestly looking for like a cave environment, I guess. It doesn't have to be though. It can be whatever's easiest. I do like the poly look because it kind of goes with the characters a bit better. Like, potentially even this mobile low poly toon look could work. Oh, set dressing. So much set dressing, so little time. Let's go back up. I think I've also changed it to be the maximum number showing at once, which probably also isn't doing a great service on my computer. Let's go back to 24 at once. Huh. Oh, the store being slow? Maybe. But I think it's more likely the streaming software plus Unity plus Visual Studio plus other stuff. Putting a tax on my old computer. Let's take a look at this poly desert, see what this looks like. The fantasy landscape might not be bad too. It's basically a bunch of really good looking rocks. Yeah, because this just looks like a colored plane. Maybe? Something to check back on. Okay, let's add the word cave to our search and see if we can find anything more accurate. Could always tint those desert rocks to be more cave looking. This is just general low poly rocks. I mean, we are looking at free, so there's only so much you can ask for. Yeah, cave isn't helping us. Okay. Fantasy landscapes? It's a lot more grass than I would like. This looks like it's actually using a... like... so you can do stuff in Unity where you build terrain, and terrain is a ton of work. Thanks for stopping by, Rob. Hand-painted nature kit. Yeah, this is all designed for basically doing a lot of terrain and painting on, like, basically with terrain you have like a layer of ground that you build up and morph, and then you paint on like details like with a paintbrush almost style. I did not think this would be so hard. Okay, I think our best bet is probably going to be either poly desert or low poly environment. Actually, this looks a lot closer. This is still going to be terrain built. Let's try it. Done looking at stuff. Let's download some grass and bushes and logs. Import. Okay, going back to the scene. We've imported this. We're going to drag this into the store assets art folder, which is going to take another second. Okay, that's not too bad. Prefabs. This is just straight up terrain. Oh man. Okay, okay. It's way too bumpy. It's essentially... so we want to squash it, I think. So it's a lot flatter. And then we want to stretch it out a bit, so we want to make it like 5 by 5. Oh, no, keep it squashed. That's not working the way I hoped it would. What is this big gray part up here? Is that it clipping? It's not the UI. Oh, duh. It's the size of the screen. This is the size of the screen. Gray is just the band because it's too big for the actual window. Okay, so it's filling in gray on the top. For some reason it looked really weird, but I think it's the angle of some of this stuff. I thought it was the camera clipping. All right, so that's not working. That is not working exactly how I would hope it would. It's all perspective. Like, it's just not looking the way I would hope. If we go back out to a 4 or even a 5, it starts to look a little bit better. If we then pull these characters back a bit, let's bring the game view back down into this little screen below. We move them back, and then if we take this terrain and give it more height, so it goes back to being a little bit closer to its original form, and then if we rotate it by 90 degrees, so that the valley is the backdrop, and then we bring it back up to full height. Okay, okay. That's actually not too far off what I was thinking. Can we zoom back in a bit and see if that looks a bit better? Then we need to bring the characters back in. And then if we make the terrain back to its original size, yeah, we run into some issues with, like, if we go too far in on the camera, it tends to look a little weird. Let's try switching it to perspective. Yeah, so perspective, you end up, like, they just seem weirdly positioned for perspective, but they could be readjusted to be more in line, and then we could dip the camera down so that we're looking more like this, so that we don't see that we're looking off into nothingness behind here. If we go back to terrain being a bit bumpier. What did the other terrain look like? This was terrain 1. What did terrain 2? Accidentally put it under the camera. Again, I think this terrain is actually meant to be, like, huge. It's meant to be, like, characters walking over hills, essentially, and I'm trying to use it as, like, a footpath size. Just doesn't really make as much sense. Yeah, I still don't like perspective, I think, is the net thing for me, is that, like, I actually think it looks way better when we change it to be orthographic. Like, that looks more like what I'm trying to achieve. I don't know what I'm, like, I don't even necessarily know what I'm trying to achieve. I just gut feel think this looks better. But the characters look small when we pull out. But I do like the way that the terrain has, like, a bit of depth to it in the background. So what we could do then is we could make these characters bigger. Not that big. Maybe 1.5 their size. Let's give them something to fight. Let's do Toon enemies, Toon dragon, Prefab. Red dragon. Red dragon's huge. See, to me, this starts to look like a thing. I think I actually like them a bit smaller, maybe. We might be able to take the camera in slightly. Back to a 4. Yeah. 3.5? Yeah. Okay, okay. And then if we needed to, for some monsters, we could take them down in size. But I don't mind this looking like a bit of a boss fight. That's cool. Okay, okay. Now how is the height on some of this stuff? Are these guys sitting on the ground? They're floating a little bit. But honestly, it's hard to tell with the orthographic. If we wanted to, we could drop them to the ground. Actually, it looks a little better if their feet actually clip in, because it looks like they're actually standing. Okay. Let's go full screen on this. I don't hate it. Like, mind you, it's not perfect, but I'll be honest. That's the one, you know, maybe I say that too much, but it's true, is that I like to try and be, like, transparent. I do design work and I do programmer work. Art stuff is probably the thing I struggle the most with. I wish that I could be the trifecta, but I cannot draw, and I do not have a great eye for artistic, but I think that this is close. This is close to what I'm... It's not exact, but I don't think I want to be exact. I think I want it to look somewhat different. And we're not using 2D art, and we don't have a 2D pixel artist who can build stuff exactly along the visions of exactly what I want. And so using 3D and setting up camera perspectives or orthographics in this way is probably going to be the right approach. The other question is whether or not this is enough light. So we can still play with the lighting. Oh man, that makes everything look darker. That makes everything look brighter. We actually had it in a pretty good spot. If we go... I don't mind some of the shadows. Speaking of shadows, can we get more shadows on... Is this thing set to receive shadows? It is. Okay, so then what is causing it so these guys don't cast shadows? So they're FBXs? What is your body made of? Here. Receive shadows. Cast shadows on. So there should be shadows happening. Light maps settings are currently... Okay, we don't want light maps. Light maps are basically baking the light in statically. But I think that we want something that's going to be... Maybe we could play and see if when we actually do play mode, if that actually creates the shadows. Oh, you hover a bit when you animate. I'll be honest, I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. Once it starts animating, that looks way better. We would need to offset their animation slightly. It looks weird that they all animate at the same rate, but I know ways of doing that, and that's honestly a more advanced thing. We'd need them to have different base controllers. Window, animation, animator. Also, the reason I like this pack is they have everything. They have all of these animations to the point where we probably want to trim some because we don't need anything near this crazy. But like, they have a whole set of animations for if you use a spear versus a whole set of animations if you fly versus a whole different set of animations if you use a sword versus crossbow reloading, crossbow stuff. They have a whole bunch of like victory stuff like clapping, pushing buttons, defending, shake head, digging, talking, throwing. Like, there's a lot of good animations to play with here. I love the diversity, and it allows you to build a system with all of this stuff, and then if you want to replace the art later, at least you had the ability to prototype all of it with something. Okay, so this is working. If we wanted to, we could add more props to this level to make it look a little less barren too. We're basically set dressing at this point. We're designing an environment. What was the position of the dragon? What if I just made this an even -1? Does he go through the ground then? A little bit. Okay, so it needs to be 0.9-ish. So he needs to be slightly in the ground because his animation takes him a bit off of it. Okay. Still curious about shadows, but before we get into that, let's close this. Let's close that. Let's reopen the low poly environment. Let's drag in a rock. It's a gray rock. A lot of these rocks are gray. Mounding. Whoa. I mean, it's a look. It's the beautiful thing about set dressing is you can take up a whole bunch of little pieces and make them work. Like, there's a lot of clipping where the messages just pass through each other, but still, I'm not hating it. Honestly, just dropping something else in with more detail kind of has a neat look. And you can kind of paint a scene here. It's like, oh, they were walking through and then like a rock slide happened and the dragon showed up. And that rock, actually, I wasn't super sold on the gray look, but it kind of works. We just grabbed a little bushel. Oh, there's a little bushel right here. There's put a little tree there. That tree looks weird. It's not quite to scale, I don't think, with the rest of the world. We just made it a little bit smaller. Now our guys look giant! What about a plant? The plant appears to be not exactly perfect. Again, I don't hate it. I say I do not hate it. Huh. What if we added more rocks? Also, one of the cool things, so let's just do a little bit of set dressing stuff. So which rock was that? That was rock 5. So rock 5 is one that we've already added to the scene. Clearly already have it, but the nice thing about set dressing is you can use just a couple of pieces, and if you just change the orientation of them slightly, you can kind of create some really interesting stuff. Like even just flipping it over, it doesn't necessarily look like the same piece. Can also hide some of the worst seams just by using other props to put them together. Glad to hear, Crazy Grammar. Alright. I think... So sadly, I put these props in when we were in game mode. This is something I haven't talked about, but when you hit play and you well, we haven't had a lot of reason to talk about, but in Unity, when you hit play and you start adding things to a scene, as soon as you hit stop, like once you release play, it'll revert any changes you made while play was happening, which makes sense. You might want to tweak things while things are live, but not want them to be sticking. But it is troublesome when you build something that you're like, oh, I really like the way this looks, and then it ends up disappearing. So what we're going to do, I think, is we're going to copy the position of this, and we are going to... Normally this works for one object. Can I do this for... No, okay, it's not going to let me copy the transform out into a different notepad. Oh, it's loading stuff. Because we re-entered Unity. Okay. I think the mounding was the thing I liked the most. So we're going to copy its transform. Copy component, and then we'll hit stop. We'll bring the mounding back in again. I think it was on the main scene, and then paste values. There we go. So we got that piece in the spot that I like it. And then we can put that rock back in, but I don't think it's going to work exactly. So we need to just try and position it similarly. So we didn't move it off the Y, I don't think. So it was somewhere around there. Let's go with that. Okay, so that looks somewhat interesting to me. Let's hit play again. His wing clips when we're not running. I have a weird idea. So one thing that is a little... I don't know. So generally in like these types of Final Fantasy games, when you have a character attack, you have them step forward, do a swing, and then you see the damage hit the enemy. But for us, because we have a bit of terrain here, this terrain is actually going to cause us to step into something, like a bit of, like, the character would clip if they step forward. So if we take Knight and we pull him forward a bit, he clips into the ground. So we don't want to have necessarily him walk up this hill. So that might be a problem in the future. I guess I don't have to deal with it right now. I don't necessarily want to make collision and have them actually be walking around in the environment, though. It's a lot more work than we need for a simple JRPG. Okay. So we got something that's looking okay. Still not positive why shadows aren't showing up. These things are supposed to receive shadows. These models are supposed to cast shadows. It's likely that we have some setting turned off. Like, this is lighting. Light settings. Scene. Can we drag the sun in? Turn on real-time lighting. Light map settings. We don't care about light maps. Interesting. What if we made a real light, but not a directional light? Would that do it? Point light. Whoa. Why are you so far away? Oh, there's light options on this. Oh, this doesn't have shadows, hard shadows. Did that do it? Still no. Interesting. It's been a while since I've had to do any shadow stuff. Real time, hard shadows, strength 1. Very high resolution. Just trying anything to try and get it to like just appear with a shadow on a thing. Okay, point lights. Hard shadows. So we put this near these guys. Nothing. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but it would look way better if we could get shadows to appear on this terrain. Okay. Stop. Hard shadows from the sun. These things should be casting. Whoa, oh, I hit control. Not what I meant. Okay, let's save this scene, and then let's make a new scene in which I'm going to just play with some of this stuff real quick. So if we make a 3D object, let's make a cube. That cube exists. Okay, let's make another 3D object. Let's make a sphere. Let's take that cube and stretch it out really long. Let's take that cube or the sphere, pull it up. Let's make a directional light. Okay. Have that directional light cast hard shadows. Have the sphere receive shadows, cast shadows, receive shadows, cast shadows. What do I have not on by default? Okay, let's get rid of the directional light. Let's make a point light. Intensity 2. Range 20. It's a super bright light. So it is casting, it is creating shadows on itself, but not on others. Huh. Okay. Unity, shadows. Not working? Seems like a common thing. Real-time shadows. Okay. You want to have it set to real-time. You want to have the shadow type on the light set. You want to have the culling mask to everything. Culling mask everything. Hard shadows. Real-time mode. Okay, all of that set. Go into project settings, quality. Project settings. Graphics. Where was that it was telling me to look? Another good place to check is inside of editor project settings. Editor project settings quality down here. That looks to be the setting. I originally instantiated this project or created a project as a 2D project, which is probably the problem. Cast shadows, receive shadows, we've already checked that. Okay, we didn't need baking. Okay, and then we can go distance 350. So the fact that we set this project up as a 2D project is likely going to have more problems. Okay, so that's working. We don't need this project. Okay, that looks worse. Good, good. 100% what we wanted to see. So we have lights on. They just look awful. Okay, and I'm gonna assume that's because of the lighting direction. So if we go back into the scene, yeah, the shadows look so long because it is daytime. Now, the quality of the shadows is going to be based on a couple things. Interesting. Very interesting. Is our dragon also casting shadows? Toon dragon. Receive shadows, cast shadows. Weirdly, he's not. Huh. I'm going to try something. So I'm going to disable this terrain and we're going to create a just plane to see if maybe it's the quality of the object that we have. Let's make it 10 by 10. It is not. I don't know. I thought maybe it was the way that it was being cast on like the low res. If we take this directional light and we disable it for a second, and then we create a point light instead, we move that point light to be closer to everyone. Give it an intensity of 2 with a range of like 100. Intensity of 2 is way too high. Have it so that it casts soft shadows. So these shadows look nicer. Well, kind of. They're still pretty pixelated, but I think that's just simply the models. Because the models themselves are pixelated, it's going to make them look pixelated. And the reason that they look so bad with the directional light on, I think is just because the light is so far away. So it's casting a really long shadow. Well, no, sorry, it's not so far away. It's the angle that that light is coming in on. Huh. I mean, it is what it is. I wonder if it's something else in that quality setting. It's preferences. Project settings, quality. No. Okay. We might just want to turn shadows off. Honestly, I just don't know enough about them to be able to make a call on why this looks so the way it does. Let's do one more quick search. Unity shadows. Pixelated? Why are my shadows pixelated? If you're using Unity Free, it will show hard shadows from one directional light only. Problem of very high shadow draw distance or very little object. A lot of zoom in. Huh. See if their image looks close to what we're... Oh, we have... No. Okay. Setting shadow type to soft shadow hardly matters as much as setting the shadow radius and shadow samples in the light maps options when it comes to action. Yeah, the thing though is we're not using light maps. This is all real time. So I don't think that would matter. Okay. Nothing in there made it sound like it could be something we're doing. We already have it. Oh, we could change it to close fit and see how that fits. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it was something someone said there. It's still not perfect, but it's better-ish. Let's see how it looks while it's animating. I don't hate it. Can we do... I'm just curious now. I'm playing with lighting. Make a spotlight. Because it said that for free version you won't be able to get multiple directional lights. Okay, we wouldn't need multiple directional lights. Okay. So then my next question is, why is the dragon not creating shadows? Cast shadows is set to on. Is this not the Toon Dragon? That looks to be his model. Render priority. Let's do the inspector lock thing. Let's lock this inspector and pull it out over to here for now. And then let's click on the dragon head, which is the actual model. All this other stuff in here is basically just bones and like information to tell how to animate. It looks like a lot of gizmos and stuff. So all these pieces are animating, which is what's causing the dragon to actually move. It's all the bones that make up its structure. They have two very similar... It's using its shader as unlit texture. Could that be why? Oh. Yeah, that'd be why. So because it's using an unlit texture, it does not cast shadows. But if we change it to have shadows, it looks very different. What are some other shader options? Yeah, none of these other ones are going to look great. It's a little weird. Could we get the directional light in such a way that it looks better? Maybe part of the problem is the directional light is coming from too far to one side. If it was against them, would that be better? I feel like the shadows should be behind them. This is one of those things where I feel like I do not have enough experience with. Like, I'm really good at coding and designing and stuff, but when it comes to like scene layout stuff, this is where I can spend literally hours just tweaking stuff because I just don't know what I'm doing. Like, this is actually a pretty good thumbnail. I like at this size trying to figure out what this should look like because it feels way more fitting. I don't like how glossy this guy looks once we put him on a standard shader though, which is probably why he's set to unlit. I wonder if there's another in between we could use. No, none of these other shaders look like they would be in any way helpful. Okay, I guess we want him to have shadows. He's got to look like this. Very shiny. We have to write our own shader, probably. Just thought there was way more options in Unity. Diffuse. Changing him to a sprite shader is funny, but not helpful. Yeah. I actually kind of like mobile diffuse more just because it has less going on. Yeah, so I guess the question is whether or not we go shadows or no shadows. Honestly, having seen it with shadows, I think I like shadows more, even if this dragon shadow looks kind of weird. We could try going without the dragon casting shadows as another option as well, so that it just doesn't cast a shadow. But then that also seems really odd with the characters casting a shadow. This is not where I thought this stream was going to go. Darkness. Yeah, there's not really a direction that makes this look better. Okay, I guess here's the thing, right? It doesn't make any sense at all. But I think what I actually want is that I want these guys to have shadows facing this way. Like that. But then I think I want the... Okay, let's play with some things. Let's set the dragon to have a lair, which is going to be... I don't know. Dragon lair. So we're going to set the dragon to be of the type dragon. And then we're going to say that the directional light casts on everything but dragon. Now, because we're in a free version, I don't think this is going to work. But then we're going to make another version that casts on nothing but dragon. Okay, so the problem now is it doesn't show up on the terrain. Okay, so what is the terrain? The terrain is of type default. So we need to add another type, which is terrain. And then we want to add the directional light we've just made to cast on dragon and terrain. Interesting. Okay, this is what they were saying. So you can't have a directional light. 2 directional lights cast shadows. Okay, great. Figured that out. So now we've proven that what we read there on the forums is accurate. We cannot have 2 directional lights in the free version, so we'll go to point light. We'll grab that point light. Drag it up here. Move it over here. Make it so it casts on nothing but dragon. Have it create soft shadows. Give it an intensity of 2. Give it a range of 1,000. Do I have to set it on terrain as well? I have. Real-time indirect bounce shadowing is not supported for spot and point lights. Okay, I don't think that's what we want, so I think that's okay. I was trying to see if this directional light could make the dragon cast a shadow on the terrain from a different direction, which I know makes no sense, but I think the problem with the directional light casting on the dragon is that, like, from this game view, most of what you're seeing is this moving shadow. And I don't really like that. I wish that if we're going to have shadows from this type of perspective, I wish that the shadow was facing this way for these guys and this way for these guys, which makes no sense and is absolutely ridiculous. But I just wanted to see if I could get it to work, and I can't. Alright, well, that was a waste of time. But now we just hit play again. And everything will reset because we lose everything. I think until we have a better idea, this is likely what we go with. I wish I had the ability to do 2D art. Pixel just looks so much better, but it is a ton more work. And we are trying to prototype a thing, but we have it now set up so that there's a dragon thing. Let's see, what would it look like if we got other models in here? So if we didn't do dragon, if we did, well, cactus monster looks like it might make sense here. Let's do prefab, cactus monster orange. Drag that into the scene. Helps if he's facing the right way. He's also going to be toon shaded, so we want to change him to mobile diffuse. I mean, oh, directional lights are casting 2 shadows. Weird. Hello, Kazukish. I don't mind it. Honestly, I think maybe that's the problem, is we're trying to do all of this with one directional light, and that's just, it's too much. But if we use like a couple different directional lights and we just soften them a bit so that they're not overlapping too intensely. So we drop this to 0. That looks too dark now, but if we can kind of bring this up slowly. Like, they have shadows. The shadows are much subtler now by making the light not as intense. We don't get as dark of a shadow, excuse me. But if we turn the dragon back on... Yeah, that looks way better. Huh. Okay, so we need the direction of the light to be coming from above so the shadows cast down. Because basically if we cast from the side, it's like weirdly distracting and a bit odd. But if we have the shadows from above, and then we use other directional lights here in order to kind of give a bit more intensity. And then what if we made yet another directional light? We dropped this one to 0.25 and then had another directional light which was 0.25. And then if this one here is pointing that way, huh. I don't mind this. I think this might be what we go with. Okay, so what do we want? We want to try and save these settings. Alright. I put a whole bunch of stuff in the scene while we were in play mode again. Most importantly, we want to copy the settings for this directional light, because the shadow directional light I think I'm happy with. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to add all of this stuff in here. And then we're going to create a new empty game object. Saved info prefab. And we're going to drag everything into here. And then we're going to drag the saved info prefab into our prefabs. Okay. Then we're going to hit stop. We're going to delete this directional light and we're going to bring in our saved prefab info into here. We're going to bring our saved info prefab into here. Okay, and then we're going to unpack prefab. Not completely, because we want to keep the prefabs of the monsters underneath it. Okay, then we got that info into the game without having to reload. Alright. So I think we have a scene now set up with some models. We've got the lighting at least somewhat figured out. I think there's still a lot more room to play with. Like, as I play with this, I think it gets better and better, but there's at a certain point we run into a problem where I think what we need is more underlighting, like lighting from below. It's just hard to make that happen with the terrain. Oh, that's... I just turned it around 180. I was like, oh, it looks really good at this particular angle. I like it a little bit darker. Huh. Cool. I think we've got a scene set up. So it's a little different. Little bit different from what we use as our reference art, but I think we've got some characters. Those characters are, you know, set up all right. We'll probably only have 3 fighters now. I don't know. We could always reposition these guys a little bit more if we wanted to try and fit more. I do not still play Minecraft Alpha. I have not played Minecraft in quite some time. If we did want to have another one of these guys... Yeah, we could totally make more characters fit if we wanted to reorganize them. I think this sizing is still the right size for if we wanted to do 5 or more or less or whatever. I think we could make this layout work. Turn that reference image back on. Identical. Absolutely. No. Okay. Okay. Cool. I think that's mostly what I wanted to do in this one. So we've got these character kind of positions set up. We've got a bit more of an actual environment. Kind of didn't really do much code work, mostly just did like kind of scene layout stuff, just kind of repositioning, playing with shadows, playing with characters, playing with models, kind of getting the angles right. Just out of curiosity now, if we did change it back to perspective, I mean, it is a look. Totally could make this thing do perspective. It's just, I think I'd much rather do orthographic for me personally. I don't know. There's options. I could always change my mind later, but for now I like orthographic. All right, so now that we've got this scene set up, I think the next steps are still honestly like to set up the actual character actions. So now that we have, this was a diversion. It was more, I didn't have time necessarily to dedicate to doing the next step, which is setting up all the actionability things in code side, but I had enough time today to kind of, maybe it's not that I didn't have enough time, is that I didn't have the concentration right now early in the morning to set up all the code stuff, but I did have time and I had the concentration and energy to just move some models around in a scene, because we have to do this at some point, and it took what looks to be an hour and a half to kind of get this laid out the way we want. Again, I think we could spend a lot more time, but at least we're close. So next steps would be making it so that when these characters reach the action bars, that we have actions that are specific to each of these characters. When we hit the attack action, they do some sort of animation. So if we were to go into the animator panel, imagine I should be able to do this. If I come in here and I say this and I go, is there a way to right click and make this trigger? Make transition? No. I thought there was a way to like push a animation to happen immediately. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. So we could start setting up some of these animations to play as part of, like, when you hit the attack action, they actually step forward and do this, and when they do, when I hit the attack button, the character who's attacking does that attack, and then potentially have these characters over here, the cactus monsters, who have a different rig, which is this one. Have them do a take damage when the characters attack. That would likely be what I want to set up next, is getting the task menu set up, which honestly might be a stream of its own, then getting it so that when you perform an action, the animations on these characters play based off of that. Along with that, probably dealing damage and characters dying. But that'll be next steps. That's going to be it for today, though. Mostly just setting up the scene, getting this kind of laid out the way we want. And for now, this is going to be Tolhi signing out. Later, guys.